Welcome back. You're watching African Perspective. Now, Tanzania is headed to the polls before the end of this month, and there is a fierce contest between incumbent John Magafuli and the opposition candidate. Now, new polling suggests that Magafuli is ahead of his rivals in the upcoming general election, but his rival is also confident that he will perform well. The SABC's Daniel Kijo has more.
Tanzania has entered the final leg of election campaigning with a little over 3 weeks left before citizens head to the ballot box. A 3-month study conducted by Trends Dynamic Consulting suggests as many as 80% of voters on the mainland intend to back incumbent President Magufuli. 18% support opposition Chadema candidate Tundu Lissu, according to the data.
We were expecting that because of the democratic nature within the Democratic Republic of Tanzania, we will find the opposition gaining a little bit of momentum towards the leading government party. But that is not the case. The leading government party still has a lot of prominence, still has a lot of sway, and still has a lot of support.
The survey of nearly 10,000 people was conducted between July and September in all regions of Tanzania mainland and Zanzibar. Magufuli's party promises to expand infrastructure and complete rural electrification. Tundu Lissu's, among other things, is looking to promote freedom, justice, and plans to bring about a new constitution. This comes as the Inspector General of Police, Commander Simon Siro, summons Tanzania's opposition presidential candidate Tundu Lissu to report to police custody. This is over statements that officials claim could jeopardize the upcoming polls as well as endanger the country's peace and security. The police commander alleges that Mr. Lissu has incited violence.
Lissu is not above the law. If the police choose to do their duty, he should not complain. There are 12 parties and the police are supposed to protect all of them. He should not get stubborn and think he can battle with the police force. He cannot compete with us.
Tundu Lissu says he's operating within the laws and constitution of Tanzania. He claims his party is being intimidated on top of efforts to sabotage his campaigns. Tanzania votes on October 28th. Daniel Kijo, SABC, Dar es Salaam.
Mr. Zain Abubakar of Tanzania Elections Watch joins me now via Skype to give us some thoughts and analysis on the situation in Tanzania as we get towards these elections. Thanks very much indeed for joining us and welcome to the program. In that package there, we just saw a police official being quite threatening, saying that Mr. Lissu mustn't think that he's bigger than us. Does that give us a clue, perhaps, of the way the authorities have dealt with the candidates?
Good evening. We, as a panel of African eminent persons watching the elections in Tanzania, are fairly concerned about various aspects of the elections in Tanzania. And bearing in mind that this is a process, we are looking at various components that will make the elections free, fair, and credible. And about, first of all, the level field. It's not, there are many challenges in terms of democratic space in Tanzania as we speak now. And we also have received many concerns from opposition parties concerning a shrinking democratic space and their ability to campaign on an even-handed manner with the ruling party, CCM. And, this covers media freedoms, it covers the right to assemble, it covers the right of movement, and it also covers the right of political parties to campaign freely throughout the Republic of Tanzania. So we are really concerned about the different aspects that will challenge the credibility of this election.
All right. So do you think that what you have seen is sufficient to alter significantly what might be the result of the election?
Well, what we are saying to the authorities and the various actors in Tanzania who are involved in the elections, that they need to do their utmost to make sure that the will of the people is reflected, and to allow for a competitive framework that allow all parties to campaign without restrictions. But so far, we have had concerns about the nomination process of candidates. Many of those who are disqualified from running based on Tanzania's legal framework were from the opposition parties. They are concerned about the right of civil society organizations and religious organizations to monitor and observe these elections. You know that, for example, the Catholic Church has been denied the right to observe these elections. We are also concerned about a number of reported violent cases. We are also concerned about restrictions being put on opposition parties from campaigning and freely articulating their ideas for these elections. You will recall that in the last elections, a number of observer missions, including the SADC one and the EAC one, raised concerns and proposed a number of changes that needed to be undertaken before these elections. None of those proposals have been implemented. We are also concerned about the independence of the Office of the Registrar of Political Parties, the independence of the Electoral Commission of Tanzania, and being able to evenly treat all the participants. We also concern the security forces and their ability to either hinder or facilitate political meetings and movement of politicians from one part of the country to another. We're also concerned about threats that are coming from different political actors. So we are calling upon the people of Tanzania and the region, particularly the SADC and the EAC, to be proactive in engaging the authorities in Tanzania, the different political actors in Tanzania, and to work hard to make sure that the electoral process is free, fair, and credible. And as a panel of eminent persons, we are closely monitoring and documenting these concerns and possible violations. We are saying it's not too late to try and level the playing field so that we have at the end elections that Tanzanians can accept, and the communities that Tanzania is a member of can also.
All right.
Don't forget that Tanzania
let me bring in our journalist Daniel Kijo as well to get a sense what's been happening on the ground. Daniel, one of the things that we've seen almost from the beginning when President Magafuli came into power has been his firm hand. And I just wonder how difficult it's been for journalists. We've heard just now from Mr. Abubakar some of the concerns that he's raised generally. What's it been like for journalists to try and cover these elections?
Thank you, Peter, for having me. I think the issue would be on the law, and I think for a lot of African countries, and especially Tanzania, there was an increase of unqualified journalists sometimes. And as a journalist myself, there are many times I've seen my fellow journalists and up-and-coming journalists, some of these online quack journalists who look for clickbait, and have had some stories and release stories that were not accurate and not true. So I feel feel a lot of what the government has done initially was to reinforce the Newspaper Act, which is a law that governs the media and how we report, but as well as introduction of new cyber laws to control the to control how the journalists give information. It has to be truthful and it has to be sort of streamlined. So some may look at this as some form of control, and I totally understand how that could happen, and some would look at it as a way of quality control. So it's a tricky issue that depends on how you look at it. There's been a lot of the rise because of social media and the digital space for journalism. There's been a rise of journalists that have the right, it's no longer just the pen, but the right to click and send his or her article across millions, hundreds of thousands of miles all over the world. So this has led to, in the middle here, the last 2 or 3 years, a dangerous culture of whatever you feel like saying, you can just say. And I guess obviously it is an information age, but there had to be a bit of control, I think, from the government side, from what they're saying, to bring it down. Now, obviously, on the other side, there are people who feel that these controls are a bit too much, and they borderline almost stop or infringe freedom of speech and freedom of journalists to report and be journalists as we are. So it is an environment that in which you need to be highly professional and ensure that you do not break the law and you're able to get the information across.
All right, but recently there was new stricter rules for foreign media introduced by government. Talk us through that, and does that not show again, perhaps a heavy hand?
Again, like I said, Peter, it depends on which side of the fence you're sitting. There are people who've always felt that foreign media have painted Africa in a negative light. There are people who feel that journalists come into a territory and do not respect cultures, do their stories and leave. And this is what I feel the government is trying to protect its people. But again, there are people who say, you need to allow journalists to do their job, to come into the country, to work with locals and get the truth out to the world. So it's a two-edged sword. It depends on which side of the fence you're sitting on, Peter.
All right. Daniel, we're going to have to leave it there, my brother. Thanks very much indeed for joining us, and we'll be chatting, I'm sure, a lot in the coming days leading up to the elections. That's our Tanzania correspondent, Daniel Kijo. And we've also been talking to Mr. Abubakar, who's with the Elections Watch in Tanzania, and perhaps a final thought from you very quickly in 20 seconds. Are you hopeful of a fair election?
If the concerns that have been raised can be addressed, yes, we could have free and fair elections, but that is yet to be seen. You've just spoken to your correspondents, and he's very careful to walk a very thin line. That in itself is indicative of the kind of context that he's operating in. In terms of the media, there are also concerns that even public-funded media houses are not even-handedly reporting the various political actors. The ruling party has a lion's share of coverage, and always their coverage is positive. And if you then do an analysis of the opposition parties, they have very little time allocated to them in public-funded institutions, but also that most of their stories are slanted and they are negative in the reporting. So we are hoping, but we are asking the Tanzanian authorities to adhere to the standards that they have committed themselves in the South African Development Community and the East African Community, the African Union, and other global instruments of which they are party, so that they can respect people's human rights and also respect the will of the people.
Mr. Abubakar, thank you very, very much indeed, and we wish you and Tanzania in general the very best of luck with the elections. Thank you so much indeed for your time this evening.
Thank you.